Okay, we are beginning chapter 35. This is a very long chapter, and it's going to be touching on a core tenet that we all recognize from the sort of cultural characteristic of Chabad, which is there's nothing more Chabad than, excuse me, are you Jewish? Yes, do a mitzvah. And there is in Torah, in Yiddishkeit, there is, I don't want to know if it's a tension, but there is a push me, pull me on Torah study in conjunction with mitzvah actions. And of course, it's not one to the exclusion of the other, but it's one and then the other. And which one are we putting primacy on? So why don't we say, excuse me, are you Jewish? Yes, here is a Devar Torah, study Torah for 5 minutes. And again, we're certainly not against that. There is this discussion in the Talmud where it asks, what is greater, Torah study or mitzvah observance? And the Talmud concludes, great is Torah study, for it leads to mitzvahs. So on the one hand, we say, see, Torah study is superior because it will bring you to both Torah study and mitzvahs. Another way of interpreting this is, when is Torah study great, or what is the greatness of Torah study? It is the execution of the mitzvahs. Now, in a certain sense, I think we can take the position that the Alter Rebbe is arguing that for the aspiring Beinoni, who is the target audience of Tanya, Tanya is not written for tzaddikim. It's not even written for people who want to be tzaddikim. It's written for the aspiring Beinoni. The primary mechanism through which we can effectuate the infinity of Hashem in this world is through mitzvah actions. It can also be done through Torah study. And then there are two characteristics in Torah study. One is the pragmatic, that is the capacity to know all the rules about what the law is if I put chicken soup in the cereal bowl. And then there is a boundless profundity of comprehension of the infinity of Hashem. And there's a little bit of a tone of like, who are we kidding? Do we really think that we are going to achieve boundless capacity of the depths of the infinity of Hashem? Probably not, or maybe not even capable. What we are capable of doing with certainty is executing the mitzvah activities. Now, there is again another sort of fundamental disparity here in the schools of thought of Hasidus and other schools of thought. What is the role of mitzvahs? So one argument would be that the role of mitzvahs is to keep us out of trouble. That if we're doing mitzvahs, we're less likely to break things. And therefore, it's to our benefit, and it's to the world's benefit, and it makes the world a better place to be. True, all true, at every level. Then there's another quality, the quality that Hasidus emphasizes, which is that mitzvahs are the fulfillment of the ultimate passion of Hashem. And this line, which we have all heard so many times, and it's plucked out of a Medrash and Medrash Tanchuma, that the purpose for which Hashem created the world is the passion that Hashem has for this physical world, flaws and all, to be a place where godliness is welcomed. Dira b'tachtainim. Those are the two words that are the bumper sticker of all of our purpose, to make this world, it's as imperfect as it tends to be, and with all of its natural antagonism towards godliness and self-centeredness, into a place where Hashem feels welcomed. Like a person, we would say, make yourself at home. That being welcomed at home is to be brought in to this type of comfort that Hashem would have, which is effectuated primarily through the mitzvahs. So in short, the mitzvahs are truly God's passion. Now, we, of course, can make the argument, why would God care that I return lost items or that I put up my mezuzah in such a way? But the counter to that is that we reject the premise of that argument that somehow Hashem has to justify himself to me. He has to explain it to me, because then I'm not doing it for Hashem, then I'm doing it for me. Meaning, if you will persuade me that this is a worthwhile idea, then I will decide to do it. Because of this characteristic, or sort of the pushback, which is Nasa v'nishma, we will do whatever it is that you ask of us. And only then will we pursue the understanding, not because we want to justify our behavior. We pursue the understanding because that empowers us to have a more profound experience with you, um, underscores the um, the centrality of bittul, total surrender of self, in the performance of mitzvahs, more so than in the study of Torah. Meaning, when a person studies Torah, I mean, of course, everything can be done with bittul or can be done self-servingly. When a person studies Torah, there is a natural personal involvement. First of all, I'm required to. I have to have an opinion. Torah demands of us to personalize Torah. We say it in the end of the davening. It's a quote out of Pirkei Avos when we ask God to v'sein chalkeinu b'seirasecha, grant us our portion in your Torah. What do you mean, our portion? That we should be able to have the clarity that is distinctive to our neshama, the gift that we have to bring to the world. So we have to have an opinion when it comes to Torah. When it comes to mitzvahs, we shouldn't have an opinion. Hashem says, shake the lulav, we shake the lulav. We don't want to say, well, I don't want to. I think we should instead do some other activity or do it on a different day. So mitzvah performance is more naturally aligned with the characteristic of bittul. Bittul, again, means the total responsibility for the action, the absolute ministering of my position, with a total surrender of my personal choice to the service of something greater than myself. So it is specifically through mitzvah performance, then whether that's particularly in our time when godliness is not so evident. We're not in the times of the Beis Hamikdash where there is a presumption of godliness. We're living in a world where godliness is not presumed, not so obvious, or where it is because our capacity for great Torah profundity is limited, whereas our capacity for precise execution of the mitzvah obligations is not limited. We can do that. We can eat the matzah and lean to the left and put up the mezuzah and shake the lulav and light the candles. We can do that. We are capable of that function. This parak, in fact, this parak through chapter 38, we're in chapter 35 now, are all going to be fixated on the final word of the pasuk of all of the basis of all of Tanya, which is the word lasoisoi, which means to do it, to execute the plan. Remember, it is very near to you in your mouth and in your heart, so that, or in order that you will do it. And again, in the world of Yiddishkeit, there are those who, again, nobody is arguing against doing it or against Torah study. The distinction comes as to where do we put the emphasis? Is the emphasis placed on the Torah study primarily, or on the mitzvah observance? And I'm talking about in the allocation of our time, in the intent of the Torah study, in our sort of social validation, and so on and so forth. So la soy soy is which again means to do it. The last word, that is the emphasis. Now the Alter Rebbe is going to address a question, which is probably a question that every one of us has had at some point, where we throw up our arms in frustration and we basically say, why is this so difficult? Why is it so hard? Meaning, ordinarily, between two enemies, they divide up the land, East Germany and West Germany, and each guy stays in his own place until every once in a while he bothers the other guy. So why can't my animal soul stay in one place, my godly soul stay in another place, and never the twain shall meet? Now, a little bit, this is what we try to design when we put ourselves in those safe spaces, whether it's in yeshiva or it's on Shabbos or it's in my home, and I say, my nefesh habahamis, my yetzer hara is not welcome here. I surround myself with holiness, and I hope to be able to avoid any distraction of anything other than that holiness. So I isolate myself or my family, and so when I say, stay away, keep that yetzer hara away from me. But somehow the nefesh habahamis keeps on popping up. And it seems to be unfair to my nefesh halakis that it is continuously obligated to be engaged with my nefesh habahamis, with my animal soul. Why can't the two, like I'm saying, draw a circle and each one stay in its own lane? Why is the godly soul required to engage with the animal soul? When I say animal soul again, remember that's the animation, because mitzvahs require physical behavior. Neshamas can't shake the lulav, can't light the candles, can't eat the matzah. So my godly soul is compelled to be intertwined with my animating soul, and it to seemingly endless frustration, because I will never be able to, unless I'm the tzaddik, displace my animal soul, or certainly not to transform it. So if I can't defeat it and I can't displace it, quote unquote, what's the point? So these issues are what are the subject matter of this chapter, chapter 35. It's a very long chapter. And again, for the first 25 chapters, we spoke about how we can do mitzvahs even when we don't feel like it. Chapters 26 to 34, we spoke about the simcha shel mitzvah and the importance of that. And now we're going to start speaking about the distinctive value, lest we feel like this is just an exercise in frustration, that I'm doing all of these mitzvahs and, so to speak, what's the point? Here, the Alter Rebbe is going to emphasize how the mitzvah, the execution of mitzvah actions, is what effectuates the absolute alignment with the infinity of Hashem. So we are on Perek Lamed Hey. V'hine, l'tois v'sbir. We want to now pick up an additional explanation. Now, this is somewhat of a reference to way back in chapter 17. You recall that on the title page of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe laid out that the objective of Tanya is to explain one pasuk in the whole Torah. The pasuk is in the book of Devarim that reads, "Behold, it is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it." And for the first bunch of chapters, we had to first explain what the battle plan is between the godly soul and the animal soul. And we had to describe the tools that the godly soul and the animal soul each have: the 10 spheres, the intellect, the 3 garments. Then we spoke about their interaction, and we spoke about that a tzaddik is not just a really nice guy who always makes sure to say good morning to everybody, though he does that as well, but he's the one who has completely silenced and maybe even transformed his animal soul. And after all of that, we got stuck with, okay, now we realize why this pasuk, which initially seemed sort of harmless, oh, wow, this is not very near. In fact, this seems rather difficult. And so the emphasis that the Alter Rebbe places in chapter 17 is where he asks the question that our experience suggests otherwise. It's not so easy. It's not so close to us to transform our heart and our mind to only want godliness, as we described through the first 16 chapters. That it's not just, again, that I'm a nice guy and I show up on time and always say thank you and good morning. It's something far more life-consuming, that there is only love for Hashem. And the pasuk says that it's very near to you, and our experience suggests otherwise. It's not so near to us. It's actually pretty difficult and pretty far away and unlikely. So the Alter Rebbe's emphasis there in chapter 17 was that what the pasuk is telling us is not that it's very near to us to only have love for Hashem and to only have thoughts of Hashem. What is near to us, that is, what is within our capacity under all circumstances, is to have enough love for Hashem, enough intellectual contemplation of Hashem, in order to get the job done. That is the last word of that verse, la soisai, is the emphasis. The kicker is enough to get the job done. That is within our capacity. So that's sort of the answer to the question how Torah can say that it's very near to us, when again our experience suggests it's not only not so near to us, it's pretty distant, it's pretty far away from us. It's really hard to do. And now here in chapter 35, we're ready to further analyze that. That is, not only that, in fact, we can always get the job done. No excuses. We could always gin up enough love of Hashem, enough intellectual awareness of the infinity of Hashem, enough to push us over the top so that we can execute our duties. So if I am sitting on the couch and Hashem wants me to get up, I may not be able to get to the point where all I want to do is get up and go and do the mitzvah. I may not get to the point where all I want to think about is doing the mitzvah. I can, however, get to the point where I love Hashem enough that I will, in fact, get up and do the mitzvah. So that's in the pragmatic execution, which is discussed again back in chapter 17. Here in chapter 35, the Alter Rebbe is now saying, L'toisvis bir. He wants to expand upon this. That is not only more emphasis about how, in fact, you can. The Alter Rebbe here in this chapter is going to be speaking about that, in fact, this is the whole purpose for creation. Now, again, I know this time around we're being a little more detailed, so it's going slower, and you're too polite to say, okay, enough already with your talking, just keep reading. But you feel free to jump in if that's what people want. But I think that we try to make an effort for perhaps a deeper understanding. In the Mimer from the fifth Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab, Reb Shalom Dov Ber, he talks about a contrast between the Zohar and Hasidus. So, like a famous rabbi once said, before I speak, I like to say a few words. So we need a little even more background. We know that Kabbalah, primarily in the Zohar, speaks about what we often refer to as the mystical side of Jewish life. And if you say that, we can conjure up all kinds of images of wizards and warlocks, and it makes for good TV. But the concept is, the Zohar speaks about the non-tangible. However, we argue that Hasidus is not just the Zohar, although the Hasidus often incorporates quotes from the Zohar, and often one of the things that Hasidus does is it brings understanding, rational understanding, to what otherwise appears to be simply stated facts. Lahavdil, like if you take 10th grade chemistry, they can tell you the chemical interface between different chemicals, and you just sort of accept it. And then as a person goes on to graduate school, they start to understand why those chemicals interact with each other in some certain dynamic. So in a similar sense, I guess we say lahavdil, that Hasidus gives us pragmatic application to the teachings of Zohar. However, Hasidus is not, I'm going to use this word, limited to the context of Zohar. And in fact, this is going to illustrate this point. There is this fundamental theological question, which is, what's the point? What are we doing here? Why does Hashem create the whole world? For what purpose? Now, this is questioned at every level of analysis in Torah. We have the literal analysis found in Halacha and in the Gemara. And we have the sort of, I guess we could say, the character. We have the intellectual. We have the spiritual, and so forth. So, for example, in the Gemara, it talks about that Hashem creates the world for our benefit, because Hashem is good, and it's the nature of good to want to do good. So Hashem creates the world in order to express his goodness, in order to demonstrate his power. Now, this is satisfactory to a certain level, and yet it further begs the question, so then how come we don't only get good from Hashem? So if Hashem is good and he wants to do good, how come there's not candy growing off the trees? How come it doesn't always appear that way? And again, this becomes a theological question, and it's not to dismiss it. It's in the Gemara, so it has a truth to it, but it's a limited understanding. So in Kabbalah and the Zohar, it tells us that the purpose of creation and of mitzvahs is to announce, to illustrate, to evoke what is called, in the Kabbalistic term, is soivev kol almin. This is a phrase we have come across before. The word literally means that which surrounds the world, meaning there's the way in which Hashem relates to the world, square pegs in the square holes and round pegs in the round holes. That is, it's very particular. And then there is the all-encompassing level that we can't touch or grasp. We might call it like culture. We all have experienced this in our interpersonal relationships. If you ask a parent, which child do you love the most? This is a silly question, because the love that a parent has for a child is soivev. It surrounds. It's all the same. Even when the kid is writing, scribbling on the walls or acting in a way that's less than lovable, there is a soivev level of love. Now, in the mamale, it is different. This child needs more attention. This child needs more freedom. This child needs more guidance. This child needs more warmth, etc., as we have all experienced. So commonly, we are engaged very much in the mamale. What does Hashem want from me today? Today he wants me to eat matzah. Tomorrow he wants me to hear the shofar, light the Hanukkah candles, etc. And if I light the Hanukkah candles on Pesach, I'm not being aligned with the infinity of Hashem. Why not? If Hashem is infinite, why should it matter whether it's Nisan or Kislev? Because Hashem interacts with us in the particulars, the mamale level. What about that soivev level? That level of godliness that's outside of the rules. So the Talmud doesn't address that directly, because the Talmud is about rules. Stand up, sit down, eat this, don't eat that, etc. Very much about fitting every circumstance to its particularism. And then there's this whole other quality that sometimes is not reached. I mean, perhaps an analogy would be a child to the parent. When you ask a child, who is this? This is my parent. What is tell me the parent, the child will talk about what the parent does for them. It makes my lunch, takes care of me, so on. What happens if a person's blessed as they get older and they can make their own lunch and they can take care of their own physical needs? They start to realize that there's a certain quality to the parent that is beyond any kind of description, that's beyond any kind of mimale. That's the soivev level, where you say to the child, the adult child, quote unquote, pardon the crassness, like, what do you need your parent for? Well, right, I don't need my parent because I can cross the street myself and make my own lunch. What I need is the parent. That's the quality that is beyond some specificity of the mamale, which again is a certain mature level. There is a saying that maturity is when the child realizes that the parent is a person too, and they stop seeing the parent only as how they serve them. And the same thing is true in our relationship with Hashem. There is the argument, why do I need Hashem? So of course, theologically, God doesn't change. We don't, therefore our relationship with Hashem doesn't change. But there is a progression where we need Hashem to help us understand, but that's not the need for Hashem, that's the need of something from Hashem. Then there is a deeper, more profound level. It's like a Yom Kippur level where I just have need for Hashem. It's not something that I'm getting from Hashem. That's the Sovev level, more or less. And this, the Zohar argues or explains, is the purpose of mitzvahs, that we can bring the Sovev level into our personal life experience. The Rebbe Rashab says, pardon me, the Rebbe Rashab writes in this mimer that Chassidus takes us to a whole other level of understanding. That through mitzvahs, we not only serve Hashem and thus reach a level outside of how it affects me, yet it's still something that I can imagine. When we do mitzvahs, the Rebbe Rashab says, and it's going to be emphasized in this chapter, we touch and we evoke and we connect and we bring into this world what is known as atzmus, the very essence of Hashem. So we can think of mitzvahs as how they serve us. That would be the sort of legal sense. If we return lost items, then lost items will be returned to us. If we eat matzah, we'll remember that we have the opportunity to leave our own personal boundaries and limits. That is a mitzvah fulfillment. It's appropriate at a mamali level. Then we remember that if we do these mitzvahs, we can be connected with the infinity of Hashem. That's a soivev level. And then there's the level that Chassidus brings to the world, that when we do mitzvahs, we effectuate that Hashem's very essence and identity is brought down here into this physical world, or is, I should say, exposed in this physical world. There is an illustration has to do with Pesach, so it might help. Just it's on everyone's mind. Hold on. In the 4 sons that we read about in the Haggadah, the wise son, what does he say? What are these testimonials, statutes, and laws that God, our God, has commanded you? And we respond to him with all of the mitzvahs up to the laws and up to the prohibition of eating after the afikomen. So Chassidus asked the question, when this son is described as a chacham, a wise son. So if he's so wise, how come he doesn't know? What do you mean? He's saying, he's wise. What is the wisdom in this question? This question doesn't seem to reflect wisdom. It seems to reflect ignorance. That's A. B, in this phrasing of the question, why does he list out the testimonials and then the statutes and then the laws? Meaning, when we commonly think of the categorizations of mitzvahs, we think always of the testimonials as being in the middle. The chukim are completely irrational. The statutes, the judgments are totally rational, laws of property ownership and so on. And the testimonials are sort of in between. On the one hand, we wouldn't have thought of them on our own, but we understand. And look, lahavdil, in this country, we have Thanksgiving and July 4th. These attest to our history. So lahavdil, but similarly, we have Pesach and Sukkot and Hanukkah and so on. So the testimonials have somewhat of a logical explanation. So when we usually think of them either as least logical, then the testimonials, then the most logical, or vice versa. But either way, the testimonials always fall in the middle. Then we have another question. We know that the wicked son is harshly reprimanded because he says, "What is this service to you?" And we say, "Oh, he says to you, but not himself." So he's stepping out. If we look closely at the question of the Chacham, he also says, "What are these edis, chukim, and mishpatim that Hashem, our God, has commanded you?" So isn't he also pushing away? Now, it's true that he says Hashem, our God, so he's not completely isolating himself, but it also has this tone of you, sort of you and not me. So Chassidus explains that the Chacham, because he is a Chacham, because he's at this lofty level, he basically is saying to us what we may be saying to ourselves. What does Hashem want from you? Meaning, if you were Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and you were so completely surrendered to the infinity of Hashem, that you had no agenda at any level, you were what we call the Merkava, the totally subservient tool of Hashem, then I'd understand why your mitzvahs would be valuable. Well, what good is it that you're a mitzvah? What does Hashem care for my mitzvah? Who am I kidding? I'm not even the Chacham. So the Chacham is saying, what is the point of the mitzvahs that you do? And our answer is, yeah, it's true that my mitzvah, my rules, all the laws evoke the infinity of Hashem. And that's what's alluded to by the order in which he phrases the question. When we have the mishpatim, we have the legal rules, the laws against stealing and murder, laws that every reasonable society has at least some variation thereof. You don't need to have holiness in order to have the laws against lying, cheating, stealing, contract violation, etc. Those are a level of godliness that we would refer to as mamale. They fit into this world. The square pegs fit in the square holes. Everybody can understand. Even the chukim, for example, the laws against milk and meat, right? I can never understand why meat is good, milk is good, but meat and milk is no good. Irrational. However, at least I understand. I know there's such a thing called meat, and I know there's such a thing called milk, and I know that I can't put them together. So even though I have to simply accept the basic premise that meat and milk can't be mixed, and that's simply God's will, but once I get to that point, at least I can understand what meat is, what milk is, and we can discuss it and debate it, right? I don't know why, like chemistry, I don't know why water conducts electricity and wood doesn't. I don't know, but I can, once I've accepted the rules of the game, I can at least discuss them with some rationale. That is the level of soivev. Yes, it requires an initial acceptance of a concept that is outside of my awareness at any level. True. However, once I've made that leap, I can have some discussion. But then comes the testimonials, edus. Now, just like a witness in court, he doesn't have to know what he saw. Let me rephrase it. He doesn't have to understand what he saw. He just has to tell you what he saw. Meaning, what is the role of a witness? He comes and tells the court something that they would otherwise not know. Now, he doesn't understand it, and they don't understand it. It's simply the attestation of the fact. And we find this in Torah. You'll note that in the sprinkled throughout the Chumash, We are sometimes called B'nai Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and sometimes Adas, the testimonial. That is, that part of the role of the Jewish people is to attest to the infinity of Hashem. What is the infinity of Hashem? Well, that's a trick question. I can't know. It's infinite. I can't define it. I just know that it is. This is that level called Atzmis, the very essence of Hashem. Not to be confused with what we sometimes say, Atzmis of the light of Hashem. It's not even light, it's just Atzmis. It is the very essence thereof. So the Edus are an attestation of that which we can't understand. I can't tell you what it is. I can only tell you that it is. That is the distinctive characteristic of an aid. So this is what the Chacham is asking. You think your mitzvahs are going to attest to the infinity of Hashem? Question mark. Not an unreasonable question. Answer, yes. Yes, that is exactly the point. And that's why we tell them all the laws, up to and including that we don't even eat after the Afikomen, even when we are in a passive fulfillment, a thou shalt not. We still can have this experience of pronouncing or announcing the infinity of Hashem's very essence and existence, even more so than when we are with the Chukim. And this is where the Alter Rebbe is headed in these couple of chapters, starting here in chapter 35. That when we do a mitzvah, me, I am not a tzaddik, and I'm not the Avos, and I'm not Moshe Rabbeinu. Who do you think you are? I'm nobody. That's the distinctive characteristic of the mitzvah, that it is predicated on the bittul, the surrender of my identity. I become a transparency, we hope, for the infinity of Hashem. How does that work? I don't know how to explain it. Why would God want it? It's an immoral question. That's what he wants. When I completely put aside myself, Nasiv and Ishmo, coming to Shavuos and so on, then I can be the one who expresses this experience. And this is this emphasis of la soisai, of the effectuation of the mitzvah activities. And also another issue that we are going to address here. Lahovin, to understand, ma'at mizeir, a little bit. And as we have talked about so often, the Alter Rebbe is very, I'll use this word, compassionate with the frustration that a person feels. Remember, the Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya not for people who weren't doing mitzvahs, not for people who were going to White Castle. The Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya for people who are doing mitzvahs, and yet they're feeling this sort of pointlessness. Like, what am I doing here? What is the point of this? Tachlis Brias HaBeinanim. What is the ultimate purpose of the creation of the Beinani? Now, when we say the creation of the Beinani, of course, our predicate of our whole Yiddishkeit is you're not created with a predestined capacity. So we're not created as Beinanim. And as we know, and the Alter Rebbe even let it slip out one time, Halavai Beinanim. We wish we'd be a Beinanim. By which here the Alter Rebbe means those whose greatest aspiration, that is literally what the most they could ever be, I know that sounds almost dismissive, is a Beinanim. In contrast to the person who could be a tzaddik, meaning, if we understood that everybody could be a tzaddik, so we'd understand, everybody's created to be a tzaddik. We're all taking piano lessons because everyone's going to be Beethoven. We're all trying out for, the Marines because everyone's going to be a Marine. But since we know that you can't, whoever you are, most people who aren't even capable, do not have the innate potential for tzaddikness. Their innate potential is, and I use this term cautiously, only Beinaniness. So what's the point of creating somebody who's going to forever be frustrated? This doesn't seem to serve any purpose. The Yeridas Nishmasei Olam Haza, and their neshama comes down into this world, L'hislabesh b'nefesh habahamis. And as we pointed out before, unlike in a sort of standard standoff, the Hatfield's here, McCoy's there, and I won't cross my line and you don't cross your line. Yeah, every once in a while we'll bump into each other and there'll be a scuffle. But pretty much I keep to my side of the line and you keep to your side of the line. So if the Nefesh Elokis could do that, then we'd say, okay, we'd understand the Nefesh Elokis has his time and the Nefesh HaBahamis has its time. Out there in the world, even in the Torah world, there is sometimes this mentality, at home and in shul, I'm one person, and out in the business world, I'm another person. The Rebbe was a big advocate that we should never separate out. We don't live in two worlds. What's the thing that we despise the most? It's the harshest form of Chilul Hashem. The guy's a great davener, he's a great davener, great Torahist, great Shabbos. Then he puts away his tefillin, he goes to work, rip your face off, and then come back from Mincha. So why? Because we believe that there shouldn't be a bifurcation. It's not like, this is my godly side and this is my animal side. Our mission is to illustrate that they are one. So if there was a divvying up, and here I'm Joe and there I'm Yosef, I get to sort of have this bifurcation. So at least we'd understand. The Nefesh Elokis has its time. The Nefesh HaBahamis has its time. I get Shabbos, you get Sunday. I get 7 a.m., you get 7 p.m. At least we'd see, but that's not the case. The godly soul is continuously intertwined with the animal soul. So again, we could throw up our hands in some frustration. What's the point? He will never be able to get rid of it. Again, that's the character of the Beinoni. So and one of the great sort of, I don't know what the word is, like Hasidic, up is down and down is up. What the Alter Rebbe is going to basically argue is that from a certain perspective, the Beinoni is at a superior level to the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik who has completely dispatched his animal soul, and again, that's work and so on. It's not like he's just born with a silver spoon. He's sort of done. He's finished. He's in the Hall of Fame and he's retired. The Beinoni, who's constantly in the struggle, that's where the game is played. Now, the Tzaddik should also remain in the struggle because it's infinite. It's not like I crossed into the safe zone and now I just get to relax. There is no rest for the weary, so to speak. He's not ever going to be able to completely dismiss his animal soul. Even if he can resist his animal soul, and again, that is the character of the Beinoni, he has the impulses of the Rasha and the behavior of the Tzaddik. Remember from the opening line, this is why the whole world is telling him that he is a Tzaddik. Not because they don't know what a Tzaddik is, but because what they can see is Tzaddik. Because remember, the Beinoni has the impulses of the Rasha and the character, the behavior, the execution of the Tzaddik. He can never stop those little tickles that come from the heart, which is where the animal soul is at authority. It has the dominant stature, and it sends the message up the elevator to the brain. So he can reject it there, like the prison guard can stop the prisoner from escaping. He can't stop him from trying to escape. As we talked so much about in the earlier chapters of Tanya, that you could only control the outcome. You can't control the impulse. So no excuse. I can never say, well, I couldn't help myself from the behavior. But it is correct to say that I cannot help myself from wanting the behavior. And you remember the illustration with Rivka Imenu, that when she was pregnant with the twins and she walked past the idolatry, Esav tried to get out. And she said, I guess I failed. And Hashem's response is no, because there are two separate nations within you. And that's true of all of us. So I can only control my behavior. I can't control what I like. I may forever be a late sleeper, so I set 12 alarms and I get up on time. But even if I get up on time every day for 20 years, I may still, in fact, be a late sleeper. Although the Alter Rebbe told us it does get easier, but the Nefesh HaBahamis is not going away. Okay, he gave up on that. He's not getting you to whatever. He's going to try somewhere else. Okay, so this becomes the frustration. What is the point if I am continuously, literally forever, always going to have to battle this? So the animal soul says, look, if you can't beat them, join them. Try your best. Like I gave the analogy before. I thought I was going to be Beethoven. I took piano lessons for 2 weeks, 2 years, 20 years. I'm not. Give it up. You're not a piano player. So if we had an objective relationship with Hashem, where everybody was supposed to reach some sort of objective standard, then we'd say, you're right. Look, give it up. At some point, it's embarrassing that you're still trying to be an actor when you're 47 and you've never gotten one part. It's not happening. Yet our response is that that's not our goal. Our goal is not to reach some level. Our goal is in the incremental step by step. I've told the story before. It was recently actually typed up in the My Story that they give out each week, the printed version. So I'm not telling you anything that's a secret. But Rabbi Ezra Shachat, who's today one of the most respected Rosh Yeshivas, when he was a teenager, he wrote a letter to the Rebbe saying, I feel frustrated. I'm not achieving. You hear the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch at 19 and the Shav Shmaisa at 14. And I don't feel like I'm achieving at that level. And the Rebbe's response was, your mission is to learn Torah. It's not, there's no mitzvah to be an author of great books and to be a tremendous scholar, which he has, of course, become. Your job is to do your obligation, to show up on time and put in your effort to the greatest of your capacity. That's where the service of Hashem comes, not through the accomplishment. But again, this is what the Alter Rebbe is addressing, is this sense of frustration. When is the point, day after day, and I quote unquote feel like I'm not getting anywhere. What that was. So the Alter Rebbe continues. I can never push it away from where it is rooted within me in the left side of my heart. I'm sorry, this way. Because again, when we're talking about the Beinani, and we are aspiring Beinanis, that's the most we can ever hope. We will never change the essential character and fabric of the Nefesh HaBahamis, which is, again, derived from Klipa, that which is in opposition to godliness. He betokva, it is as strong, ubigvurasa, and as mighty, etzlam, kitoldasa, unchanged from the day it was born. It has not changed at all. We see this in the world, in nature. Nature is a very tough customer. And, most of the world is covered in water. And Hashem peeled back the waters to reveal the land. And in some of the land, we're able to chop down forests and build skyscrapers. And every once in a while, we get a snowstorm and we go, whoopsie, I guess we haven't defeated nature, or a tsunami, or whatever it is, or this craziness we've been living through for the last year plus. We think we've defeated nature. We have overcome nature. And he reminds us that nature is not slowed down. I mean, again, who would have believed it? If I would have told you 2 years ago in a country with clean running water and sanitary facilities that we would be affected in this manner, it's a reminder that nature is not going away. And nature is relentless no matter how many skyscrapers we're able to build. Well, that's true of the nature out there in the world. It's true of our own nature. It's not going away, even if we have been able to keep it at bay for some extended period of time. It's not backing off. And it's just as strong as it ever was. So again, this is the frustration factor, which the Alter Rebbe is addressing. As we say, what's the point? I'm hammering away and hammering away and hammering away, and I don't feel like I'm making any progress. So again, if the objective was to be Beethoven, we'd say, you're right. Look, give it up. You're not going to make it. Go find a different line of work. But if we understand, or once we understand that our goal is not a goal, it's about in the moment, it's about being connected with the infinity of Hashem in the moment, now we recognize that we are not about win-lose, about failure-success. So the Alter Rebbe says, only, and I use that term in some heavy quotes, well, the only thing we've been able to do, which of course is the whole thing, is prevent the animal soul from expressing itself in the garments, in the conscious thought, spoken word, and behavior. That's all we've been able to do. Like the Chicago River. We've all been able to prevent it from flooding Lakeshore Drive. But every once in a while, it reminds us that it's in charge and we aren't. And then you get, flooding on Lakeshore Drive. You go, well, what do you mean? We put up a sign, no flooding. We said we have engineering, and it's incredible. But yet the river and the lake are still the river and the lake. They have not backed off just because we have been able to hold it off for so long. So we say, if we came, and if so, here the Alter Rebbe summarizes it. Lama zeh yordo dishmaseim le'olam hazeh legal reichas v'shalom lilachem kol yameim imayetz v'lo yachlulai. What then is the purpose of bringing the neshama down here into this world? Meaning, the neshama is up in Shemayim. It is an absolute part of Hashem. Hashem calls him in one day, and he says, listen here, I'm sending you down into this world. I want you to swear to be a tzaddik and not a Russia, and even if the whole world, etc. But we might ask, so what are you sending me there for? The best I can do is tread water until I get back. What is the point of all of this? I'm going to go down. Then the Nefesh HaBahamis is going to hammer away at me. I will resist it. I won't resist it. Even if I resist it every single day for the rest of my life, at the end of 120 years, I'm returned back to you, just beaten and bruised. What's the point of all of this? Just to hold my breath until I get back? Is it a pointless, syphilis, whatever it's called, push the rock up to the top only to have it roll down? What's the point? At best, I'll return unharmed. At best. At worst, the Nefesh HaBahamis will overrun me. So what is the value of all of this? What is the point of sending my neshama down here into this physical world? Is it just for pointlessness and emptiness? To battle with my Yetzer Hara, which I'll never defeat, just to hold it off, to come back? Like the guard in the guard tower just standing out there and saying, today nothing happened. Is that what am I rooting for? Just for nothing to happen? So the Alter Rebbe responds. So he says, Zeis nachamasam lenachmam b'kaflayim l'tashia. So here the Alter Rebbe uses a sort of extended phrase. This should be your comfort, to comfort you doubly, and to bring you l'sameach libam b'Hashem, and to bring you simcha. That is, not just to sort of make you feel better. So again, the whole point is seemingly circular. You send me down here to fend off against the Nefesh HaBahamis, so that at the end of my life, I return and I say, I made it, I didn't break anything. I'm just the way I was. It would be like making a financial investment, and I put $100 in a stock, and after 20 years, they give me back my $100. Okay, it's better than losing it, right? It's better than giving me back $99. But what was the point of this whole exercise? This seems to be nothing but circular. So the Alter Rebbe, first of all, says, look, I understand how you feel, and I'm telling you that this frustration is common, and this is what we have found to be the salve. It's not just, this is the way it is, and you better learn to live with it, but this is to give you simcha about it. What does he say? B'Hashem hashoichin itam. Hashem is with you. He dwells with you. B'toich toirasam, in your Torah, v'avoidasam, and in your avodah, and in your service. So it's not just that, again, you hold your breath and tolerate it like it's some sort of boring bar mitzvah, that you have to be there like it's an endurance contest, and you hope to emerge at the end no less worse for wear. Here, the Alter Rebbe is going to respond to this idea. So he begins, like we always have to, with some source material. So he quotes, "V'hu behektim loshen hayinuka b'Zohar Parshas Balak." So he has to go to the Zohar. Why does he have to go to the Zohar? Because in the Gemara, in the legal analysis of Torah, we're just going to tell you what to do. We don't really get into the why you should do it, other than why it's good for you, which we understand. We understand that Torah and mitzvahs are good for us, that we are better off when, as I said, we eat matzah and remember the Exodus, and we have fair execution of contracts and so on. We recognize how that makes life betterer for us in this physical world. That we get. But what is the purpose? What is the essence of it? That's already something that is not going to be found in the literal readings of Torah. For that, we need to go into something a little more, I'll call it personal, and that's the Zohar. So he quotes the Yenuka. Now, Yenuka is not a name. It means the youngster. And he was the son of Rav Hamnuna Saba. Rav Hamnuna Saba means Rav Hamnuna, the elder, like Saba is like grandfather. So he was known as the youngster or the kid. Now, what kind of almost semi-silly name is that? The point is that he's bringing a certain type of youth, a certain type of spiritual smallness, which in the classic Hasidus, it's better that way. That's our answer to everything. It's better that way. There is a certain virtue and a certain opportunity that is extended to the person who holds themselves to be like this sort of small level. Not, oh, I'm small, I'm incapable, I'm insignificant, I don't know, I just do what everybody tells me kind of sense. Rather, this quality called youthfulness, this eyes wide open, this enthusiasm. We're coming up to Shavuos, where we know the story that Hashem told Moshe, how do I know that I'm going to give the Jews the Torah, and it's not going to be like, a new toy, and you'll enjoy it for a couple of weeks, and then it winds up in the back of the closet, and you never see it again. And we came up with all kinds of ideas. We'll have the prophets, we'll have our history, we'll have rabbis who will rebuke us. And Hashem said, no, until we said our children will be our guarantors. So Chassidus explains, why were the children satisfactory guarantors to Hashem? So, of course, the idea that we'll pass it on every generation. There's another quality that we pledged to be like children. What does that mean? A child, childlike, as opposed to childish, they sort of take your word for it. They don't have this cynical, oh, I know that one already. Oh, yeah, I know that one. They're wide-eyed. I mean, this is every school's challenge. The kid comes into school, he's all excited to learn, and then school somehow has to either nurture that or it can knock it down. It's a tough call. So when we talk about the youth here, we mean this sort of wide-eyed, enthusiastic optimism, as opposed to the sort of curmudgeon who's, oh, I know that one. So that's what we can learn from this lesson being taught by, again, the Yenuka. That's not his name. He was the son of Rav Hamnuna, who was called sort of the old one. So this isn't just for the big neshamas, for the really holy people. And this is one of the obligations that the Baal Shem Tov brought to the world. Everybody, can't someone else do it? I have to do it too. Like we're told in the Talmud that no one was poorer than Hillel. And since he studied Torah, no one could ever claim that I'm too poor to study Torah. So the same thing used to be. We thought this is for great people, tzaddikim, scholars, and so on. And the Baal Shem Tov came along, and very much the lesson of yesterday, the 28th of Nisan, you, every one of you. I give this over to every one of you. Not me. This is for other people. No, it's for you. So this youthful enthusiasm. So the Alter Rebbe continues with this quote. The pasuk reads like this: Hachacham einav b'roshai. The scholar, his eyes are in his head. Now, this is not a biology lesson. Obviously, a person's eyes are in their head. What does this mean? So he explained. Is there somewhere else that his eyes would be? Obviously not. Ella kra hachihu vadai. This is certainly the Yenuka's explanation. This is, in fact, what the pasuk means. The pasuk means that we learned la yahach bar nash b'gilei dereisha arba amos. We know that a person is not supposed to walk 4 steps, which means out of their immediate surroundings. 4 steps is sort of like, imagine if you're in a crowd, there's a sort of natural space. Anything that's right next to a person within 4 steps of them is considered to be in their space. So a person shouldn't leave their space with a bare head, without their yarmulke on. Why not? The Shchinte Sharye al Resha, because the divine presence is hovering over our head. God is hovering over our head. And he continues. So when it says a person is a chacham, and as we have explained so many times, that the word chacham, which if you look it up in the dictionary, means smart, but we're not here talking about his intellectual capacity, his IQ. We're not talking about how many pages of Torah he's mastered. We're talking about, again, that distinctive quality of the human being, unlike an animal, to imagine something outside of myself. You know, we can train an animal that if he walks on his hind legs, we give him a cookie. And I don't mean to be sort of harsh, we train our children the same way. If you say, please, I want a cookie, say, please, can I have a cookie? We give him the cookie. It's essentially no different than when we train the animal that if he goes on his hind legs, we throw him a cookie. And again, I don't mean to be harsh about it. The quality of Chachma is the capacity to imagine something outside of myself, not just to learn another process of effectuating my own results, but it's to be aware of something greater than myself, other people, and of course, ultimately of the infinity of Hashem. So when we talk about the Chacham, that the divine presence hovers over his head, we mean that it is higher than himself. He looks at something that is higher than himself. The kad inoy tamla neda the huna hoyre the alik al resha. It's tarach lemishcha. Begin the gufa the barnash. Now the Yanuka now takes it to another degree, and he says, "This divine presence, how do I incorporate? It's hovering above me, but how do I make it part of myself?" So he uses the analogy of a candle. A candle has three basic components. There is the spark or the flame, there is the wick, and then there is the oil. And the spark without the wick or the oil will dissipate into the atmosphere. Without the oil, it'll just burn up the wick. And so the oil sustains that the flame will burn the wick but not consume it, and it will be sustained. And this is a simple illustration of a flame. We've all seen it. This is what it means. Now, what is that? That's the metaphor. What's the analogy? What's the lesson? The Barnash Iupsil of Nahiradal Leila Vashalma Malka Tzavach V'Omar Shemin Al Reshcha Yechaser. The Nahir the Beresh Yitzrich Lemishcha V'Ina Nuvden Tav and Al Derech Al Chacham Eina Beresh Yakanashon. So what then is the analogy? The spark is the divine presence, and that divine presence Hashem desires to be attached to our humanity. And just like the flame, if it's not held down here, it dissipates into the atmosphere. The same is true. If we don't seize the Shekhinah, the divine presence, it dissipates into the atmosphere. What is going to, another possibility is that the flame simply burns up the cotton wick and it becomes consumed. What then gives the flame staying power that it should be held onto by the wick and not be burned up is the oil. And what is the oil? Like the pasuk says, oil on the head you should not diminish, or there shouldn't be deficient. The oil is the mitzvahs. That when we do mitzvahs, we attach the flame of Hashem to the wick of our humanity. So the oil catches the flame and holds it to the wick. This is that process. This is what mitzvahs do. Now, as the chapter will go on to describe, this is the ultimate will of Hashem, that Hashem wants to be here in this physical world. If we ignore it, the flame dissipates into the atmosphere. How do we hold on to it? How do we sustain it? And the answer is through the mitzvahs, which hold the wick, which hold the flame, godliness, Hashem, the Shekhinah, to the wick, our humanity, without consuming it. That is, we don't become overwhelmed, a little bit like yesterday's parsha with Nadav and Avihu, where we become completely subsumed within the infinite. We don't become overwhelmed by it. Rather, the wick holds the flame when the oil nourishes the wick to sustain the flame, and so it burns together. All right, we'll stop here, and then this mashal, this analogy of the wick, becomes the theme for much of the remainder of the chapter.
Is the flame sovev?
The flame is sovev, correct. All right, have a good week, everybody. We'll see you next Tavach.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.